The Zenfone 9 is kind of a strange phone. It wasn't the first small Asus phone that they made, with these 8 being similar in size. It's not considered the best because of the upgrade downgrades that the Zenfone 10 brought, but instead, the Zenfone 9 is a phone that ultimately failed me. It is also confusing because trying to find this phone is not easy and not cheap for what you get, and oddly has a lot coming from China and Hong Kong. But still, let me tell you about how I feel after 3 years after the Asus Zenfone 9 came out. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review here with the thick, compact flagship of 2022. Let me tell you why my tone on this phone has changed. I was so excited to get this phone, and it was one that I bought new, but this also became a strange one. See, there are many versions of this phone, some that may work fine with your carrier and others that may not. I use T-Mobile, so mine works fine, but also doesn't. And as far as I know, only the box for the phone will let you know if you have the A, B, or C version with this list right here. This means I have some 5G bands, but never actually pick them up. You will want the C version if you're in the US, something I didn't know when I was buying this phone. Regardless, everything else is the same for all versions besides the cellular bands. This is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chip with 6, 8, or 16 gigabytes of RAM and 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage, with the phone colors following Google, meaning that you only get some certain combos, like how the red is only 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of UFS 3.1 storage. I always hate when companies do that, and it makes us take for granted some companies like Apple that don't do that. Powering the phone is a solid 4,300 mAh cell, which can be charged via USB-C at up to 30 watts of charging with a PPS charger. As for the build, the display is a 5.9-inch 1080p Samsung OLED panel that runs at 120 Hz and has a 445 pixel per inch density. It can get pretty bright in sunlight even with auto brightness turned off, but normally sits at 450 nits of manual brightness or 800 plus with auto brightness enabled. Do note that Asus advertises 1100 nits for maximum brightness, just not sure how they get that. Also, I noticed this little box, and it only happens when it's full brightness and on like a white screen. You can see this little box right here. Not entirely sure what this is because under normal lighting, I don't see this. There are some bezels and shins for this phone, but it's perfectly fine given that it's supposed to be a compact device. There's a hole punch in the corner for the front camera and an area that is obviously the earpiece speaker, one that pairs with the bottom speaker to give a fairly great stereo feel for the size. This is Gorilla Glass Victus, while the frame of the phone is aluminum with nothing on the left side, the fingerprint scanner power button combo on the right side with those volume buttons, and a headset jack on the top of the phone. Wow, wow, wow. The bottom is where a dual SIM tray is, a microphone, the bottom speaker I told you about, and the USB-C port in the middle that is unfortunately 2.0 speeds. Yep. The back is where the massive cameras are, and a little camera flash. The back is also plastic, but it does have this rough paper texture to it that gives an interesting feel. But unfortunately holds oils and grease, so I like to keep mine in a case. The phone comes with some 5G support, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, and an IP68 dust and water resistance. Do note that this is on their overview page of their website and not actually on their tech specs page, but they also do tell you about the water resistance. I'm all for companies saying this because it doesn't matter what phone you buy, water resistance is not forever. What is forever is that this phone is 5.76 inches tall and 169 grams. Nice. Now give me a couple minutes to give my opinion on what I just said, but first I want to tell you about the cameras. Front camera is a 12 megapixel focusable sensor that can actually produce some great shots. This is a Sony IMX663, which was used in the Zenfone 8, but also the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III as a telephoto camera. This does 4K 30 frames per second max, which is perfectly fine for video. Then on the back we have a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera that is also focusable, allowing for macro shots, but also the same Sony IMX363 that's found in the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III for the ultra-wide as well, just with a slightly different aperture and obviously different camera lens. This one is capable of 4K 60 frames per second video and has some decent electronic stabilization, as there obviously isn't any optical stabilization. The last camera is a 50 megapixel focusable and obviously a super optical stabilized camera, not the one found in the Xperia 1 Mark III, but the same sensor that's found in some OnePlus and Xiaomi phones, but allegedly the Samsung A54 5G and the Nothing Phone 1. If true, I'll let you be the judge on who does better post-processing for the camera and obviously different camera lenses. Regardless, this bends down to a 12.5 megapixel shot, but has a 6-axis hybrid gimbal system, but apparently only in 1080p video. For 4K recording and even 8K recording, you do get some great stabilization, but not the hyper steady stabilization that they claim, which probably only gives you extra electronic stabilization. On the specs, Asus lists that the recordings are electronic image stabilization, but it feels like optical and electronic is helping keep video look stable. Maybe that's what they mean by the hybrid gimbal. Now, the video is great, but clearly there's no HDR beyond 4K 30 frames per second, so sure, some phones may look better, but this 4K 60 frames per second is still great with the option of 4K 120 for slow motion. And the photos are good. Low light obviously isn't the best, but I'm also realizing that no one really does low light that good. But generally photos are hit or miss, and by that I mean they're either whoa or still pretty good, almost pixel level even. While this has the same camera sensor as the Nothing Phone 1, I will say that this is clearly the winner. Now, this phone is not all compact perfection, but it still is. Coming back to this phone after a while of not using it, I felt a little bit disappointed, but really for the dumbest reasons. We are stuck with Android 14, as Asus stuck to their strict 2-year policy and stopped giving us updates, leaving us with Android 14 on the July 2024 security patch. I wish they let us unlock the bootloader, but Asus is known for not liking their customers. Honestly, don't know how else to explain that, but it really does feel like that. And while Android 14 isn't that bad, Android 16 just came out, and eventually this phone will be 3 years behind when Android 17 comes out, and then Android 14 will feel ancient. This doesn't really change much for the software though, giving us a great amount of customization, which I've gone over in past videos of this phone. Like the Zen Touch on that power button fingerprint scanner that gives you more features out of that button, which seems great, but I just stick to dragging it down for notifications and double clicking for the camera. But even some menus can be Asus or Android versions, which is not something you see with many other phones. As for running the phone, the processor is still great and gaming is a breeze. The phone gets warm when gaming, but stays pretty normal for doing regular tasks. But like I said, app performance is still solid, just like how vivid the screen looks when watching content, honestly feeling like a 1440p screen even though it's only 1080p. One thing I am experiencing now, which feels like maybe a factory reset will fix, is the screen flickering thing. I figured out that it's probably a glitch with the refresh rate switching, as it only shows up in auto and goes away when I choose 60, 90, or 120Hz locked mode. Which is cool that you can do that, but annoying that you might have to. I haven't seen other people complaining about this issue, so your mileage may vary. The battery used to be amazing, but now it kind of feels like it's not that great. You can still get some great performance out of it, but it's not the battery king that it used to be, or at least you can be the judge on how true that is. It's not terrible, and to be fair, replacing the battery doesn't seem like an impossible task, especially with the back being plastic. But for me, the novelty of the phone has kind of worn off, but at the same time, there's not really much to replace this. Sure, the 1 year newer Asus Zenfone 10, but at what cost? We jump from 120Hz to 144Hz on the 10, but that's only in games. The 10 has Android 15, but it looks like security patches are what Asus guarantees from here on out. The camera is essentially the same, but the ultra-wide goes to a 13 megapixel sensor and doesn't focus, while the front camera goes to a 32 megapixel camera that also doesn't focus and loses 4K video support. We get Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.3, wireless charging, faster RAM and storage, and 20% overall faster processor, but at what cost? Well, at $100 plus more, so I guess you can decide. Asus isn't the greatest company. Besides some gaming computers in their ROG line, Asus wasn't really that great of a company to begin with. They've had some hits in crazy ideas, but they made a bunch of strange moves in the phone industry. To be fair, they did some interesting things like the Zenfone AR and Zenfone Zoom, but software support is crucial to some, but overall shows your true colors when you don't have that support. To spend millions developing a device that you want to support for a year or two and sell it for maybe a year speaks volumes to the consumers that you're selling to. It might be one of the reasons why companies like LG got out of the phone market. If I buy an Asus phone with little to no support, why would I buy a computer or gaming tablet from them? Given the 9.1mm thickness, software support, cameras, and pricing, maybe the Google Pixel Fold, which is 12.1 megapixels thick and actually shorter, is the better choice at $400 plus. It is also much heavier though, and we can't forget about how the Asus Zenfone 9 still has a headset jack. Sure, a $9 adapter from Apple solves this issue, but again, headphone jack. And that's my review of the Asus Zenfone 9 in 2025. Think I was too negative about this phone? I probably was, because honestly, it's not a bad phone to this day, but also when I did my pros and cons videos, I got more people watching the cons, so maybe people like more negative videos and just don't want to admit it. Either way, let me know what you think, and as always, thanks for being a part of the 1%, and thanks for watching.